All right, we're back for week number 2 of Folklore and Fairytale Friday. For the month of October, every Friday, I am going to be doing one of these episodes. It's kind of a new series I'm testing out where I talk about different cultural folklore, mythology, fairy tales. So last week we did it on the dokebi, which is the Korean goblin, and this week we are going to be doing it on the Kumiho. So as you probably can tell, this week I don't have any makeup on, so I will be putting makeup on in this video, unlike last week's video where I basically took it off and did like a get unready with me. So I'll be going like maybe back and forth on get ready with me / get unready with me. So this one is going to be like a get ready with me. So I was really excited by all the feedback from last week. It seems you guys really like it, but it will be continually helpful to hear you guys' feedback as this is kind of like a transforming series on my channel, and it takes a lot of research and time, so it's helpful to know if you guys want me to continue doing this. So I definitely need to see those comments in the comment section and like this video if you want me to continue doing this series. But it's been really helpful seeing your guys' feedback, and I actually saw one of you guys requested this idea, so that's why I went with the Kumiho. There are a lot of different forms of animal, ghosts, or creatures in Korean and Asian mythology because it's thought that, you know, since they're close to nature, these type of deities or supernatural creatures are innate to culture, the surrounding areas, and just kind of like the general thinking process when it comes to, you know, Asia and history. Now, the most notable among them, especially in a lot of Asian culture, is the Kumiho. Japan has their own version, which is called the kitsune, and China also has their own version, which is called the hulingjing. Vietnam even has their own version of the Kumiho, which is called ho tin. Now, the idea of Kumiho is actually believed to have originated from China for all of these cultures, and it's actually kind of funny because the concept of hulingjing is kind of almost like a derogatory term. In China, it's like a seductress who snatches husbands, so I would imagine it's kind of the Western equivalent to maybe like a homewrecker. So maybe not the nicest thing to be called, but you'll kind of see why that's thought of as related to the Kumiho or the nine-tailed fox, which is what a gumiho is. Now, foxes as animals in particular are very highly respected among Asian cultures because they're thought to be like highly intelligent creatures, a type of animal that kind of hunts alongside hunters and just, you know, sly as a fox is kind of the idea. So you can kind of see that correlation go into some of the folklore that I'm going to be talking about and some of these stories. So they're just super smart, but also kind of tricksters. Now, in Korean culture, the Kumiho is actually something that is an evil creature. It's thought to always be malevolent and something that is after human flesh. In China and Japan and other cultures that have a similar creature to the Kumiho, they're more thought to be as like tricksters, but also to have like a moral compass. So it kind of reminded me a little bit of the dokebi from last week's episode. They can almost reward the good, but also punish the bad. But like I said, in Korea, the Kumiho is more thought to be like a bad thing. Like you never want to encounter a Kumiho because it's nothing good. Another differentiating factor for the mythical Korean fox versus China and Japan is the fact that there is something called a fox marble or bead. This whole concept is somewhat unique to Korea, but we'll go into what that specifically is in a little bit. So now let's go ahead and talk about how a Kumiho comes to be, or like their origin stories. So like I said, Kumiho are thought to be extremely intelligent and wise creatures in folklore. And this is because Kumiho are actually supposed to be extremely old creatures, hence why they're wise. So a gumiho is formed after a fox lives for 100 years. So after they reach the 100-year mark, every 100 years that they live additionally after that, they gain a tail. So that's why you'll see them pictured with multiple tails up till 9. So if you do the math, 9 tails would be about 1,000 years old. So these are thought to be the most dangerous form of Kumiho, the nine-tailed fox. And therefore, these forms are the most powerful of the gumiho. So the first known documentation in text of the concept of the nine-tailed fox or the mythical fox or the kumiho is actually in the Classic of Mountain and Sea, which is an ancient Chinese text. This ancient text actually chronicles a lot of other mythical creatures or beings, including the Huangguan, which is essentially China's version of the phoenix. Nua, which is the mother of mythology in China, and of course, the nine-tailed fox. So to read the translation from the text, there is a place called Cheongshan Mountain where there's jade in the south and green soil in the north. Some beasts here look like foxes, have 9 tails, and their sound is like a child and eats humans as well. If you eat this, you won't fall into the magical energy. And then moving into the earliest known depiction of the gumiho in Korean folklore, it's actually in the writings of Choi Chi-won, who lived from 857 to the 10th century. And he is a noted Korean Confucian official and poet from the Shilla era. He mentions in his writings that foxes are able to transform into a beauty, which might actually lead into the concept, which we'll get later on into, foxes as shapeshifters. So they're kind of tricking other mortals or humans in their human form, which a lot of times you'll see manifest in the form of like a very attractive or beautiful woman. A seductress, if you will. So Kumiho always try to protect their identity from their human counterparts, but it's said that Kumiho always have some form of fox trait physically. So whether that manifests in the form of maybe having like fox-like features on their face, more fox-like eyes, higher cheekbones, and more narrow nose, a fox-shaped face, or they could even have fox ears, or, which is commonly mentioned, a fox tail or the 9 tails. So in the folk tale, which was translated by Imbang, which is called A Story of a Fox, you'll actually see that the features of a fox are kind of introduced as being very human-like, but also there's something a little bit off, as you'll see the main character kind of figures out that the being that he's encountering is not actually human. So the story starts off with giving a little bit of an introduction into the thought process behind foxes are thought to be very wise and also, like I said, long-living creatures. Back in ancient times, some of the longest living creatures were believed to be tortoises, cranes, and also foxes. So it's not just like trees turn into coal or pine sap turns into amber. Foxes don't actually die, they actually kind of metamorphosize, and unlike humans who kind of take on an angelic form once they pass away, foxes have the ability to change their shape, which is an introduction into the idea of foxes being shapeshifters. So the story goes that there is a young man who goes by the name Yi Kwai. Now Yi Kwai is a son of a minister and governor of the Pyongan province, which is actually part of the provinces that Korea was originally split up into during the Joseon dynasty. So there were actually 8 provinces that Korea was split up to, Pyongan being one of those provinces. And if you actually look at the different provinces, how they're broken up, they're actually broken up by natural boundaries. So a lot of times they follow along mountain lines or rivers. And the differences between them could be seen through some cultural differences as well as dialectual differences. So despite the fact it all being, a unified country in Korea or a unified kingdom, the provinces kind of acted as individual areas, if that makes sense. So back to Yi Kwai, who is up late one night studying, and he is in one of the quarters of the pavilion in one of the pagodas. And as he's studying, he notices a young, beautiful girl emerges, and she's dressed really nicely. She doesn't say much, and she just kind of goes into the corner of the pagoda and sits. Confused by her presence, Yi Kwai asks who she is. I mean, I think any of us would be like, excuse me, who are you? And she slyly smiles but does not respond. He approaches her closely and realizes that she must be some form of, he even goes as far to say a ghost or dokebi, and he realizes something's off. So realizing he's by himself in this pagoda, he grabs the girl, runs out, and starts yelling for his servants or his family to come and help him. But unfortunately, at this time, of course, everyone is asleep because, like I said, he was studying late at night, and the fox girl bites him in the nape of the neck, and he screams in pain, lets her go, and she runs off into the wilderness. And then he realizes how close he came to succumbing to this fox girl. Now again, the point of me telling you guys this story is to introduce the idea of them being very human-like, but there's always something that's kind of off with them. So whether it's something in their appearance, maybe they look more evil, or something about their character where they're coming off differently than maybe a loved one would, or someone you know, or normal people, or even a lot of times the Kumiho are also said to speak in like old terms because they are so old that the way that they speak or the words they choose or the way they form their sentences is like old speak. So that's also kind of like an identifying factor. But if you're not honed into noticing these different characteristics, it's very easy to be tricked into the Kumiho's ways. Now, this is actually portrayed in the story of the Fox Girl, or sometimes it's called the Fox Sister, just depending on the different interpretations of this story. But this is a pretty common folktale where you'll see Kumiho featured as the main character. So the story goes that there is a very wealthy and prosperous stable on the mountainside, and it's owned by a nice little family. You know, there's a mom and a dad, they've got a son and a daughter. And during the day, the daughter goes off and her job is to go collect herbs and different mushrooms along the countryside and bring them back to her family. So she's out one day, it turns dark, daughter's still not back. So naturally, like any parents would, the dad starts to freak out and he starts to assemble a bunch of stablemen together, getting ready to basically go and search for his daughter. As they reach the first ridge of the mountain, the daughter appears, and the father, being almost frustrated but relieved to see his daughter, asks immediately where she'd been and, you know, how could she just not come back during the day, and it's very dangerous out there with all the animals in the wilderness. She shouldn't be out there late at night. And she responds that while she was picking the herbs and the mushrooms from the countryside, she got tired from the walking and all the gatherings, so she accidentally fell asleep and didn't realize she was staying out late. So it was unintentional, and she begged her father, please don't be angry with me, I just accidentally fell asleep. So relieved, they all go back to the stable and go to sleep. Now the next morning when everyone wakes up, they find that one of the horses in the stable was dead. Now this was odd because the horses didn't show any signs of illness or that they were sick. There's no reason that this horse should have died, but you know, things just kind of die. So they brushed it off and just kind of continued on with their daily life. Now the next day, same thing happens. But again, you know, I guess back during these times, there's still animals, and animals kind of die for no reason sometimes, so they weren't extremely alarmed, but they decide to put a stableman at guard to kind of watch over the stable overnight. The next morning, the family wakes up and finds that that stableman was dead. Things are getting really weird, and they don't know what to do, so the father tells his son, okay, you need to go and guard the stable overnight. What we're gonna do is we're gonna make like a little hideaway out of some hay. We'll give you a little lookout peephole, and you just kind of watch and see what's going on. So the dutiful son takes up his position and stays overnight. And during the night, he's kind of hanging out, nothing's really going on, and he hears footsteps. Extremely alarmed and scared, he has no idea what he's hearing, but to his relief appears his sister. And he's kind of thinking to himself, what is my sister doing here? But I'm glad it's my sister because I was getting worried there for a second. And he's watching as his sister comes into the stable. She's got sesame oil with her. And then to his horror, his sister rolls up her sleeves, oils up her hands and her arms with the sesame oil, and proceeds to reach into one of the horses and pulls out his liver. Shaking and alarmed, the son doesn't know what to think, and he watches as his sister consumes his liver raw. To be honest, he has no idea what to expect. I mean, he just witnessed his sister, his family member, someone he grew up with his whole life, just put her arm into an animal, pull out an organ, and eat it. So something's up. So he goes and tells his dad the next day what he saw, and his dad gets so angry with him and says, I can't believe that you would blame something so ludicrous on your sister. You must have fallen asleep, and you're telling me a dream you'd had. And the son, adamant about his truth, is saying, there's absolutely no way I was asleep. I know what I saw. Now he's upset, both his parents, his mom is crying, his dad is angry, so he decides, I just gotta leave, like I need to remove myself from this situation. So he takes the nearest path and just travels along that, begging for food along the way. And as he's kind of going down this path for a couple days, he sees a monk trying to cross a stream. Let me do my eyeliner really quickly because I don't think I'll be able to do my eyeliner while talking, and then we'll come back to what this monk was up to. Some of you guys had said I should do like makeup in the theme of every week's Folklore and Fairy Tale Friday, but I am honestly not very good at like sci-fi or, you know, artistic makeup, so I did do a little bit of a fox eye with my eyeliner. That's the best I can do. So back to this mysterious monk. So He sees this monk trying to cross the stream. Seeing that the monk is struggling, this young boy, who is virtuous, goes and tries to help the monk cross the stream. So once they cross the stream, the monk is very grateful for this young boy's help, and he notices he's hungry and doesn't really have any place to go, so he tells the young boy, why don't you come stay with me for the night? I'll give you a nice meal. You can relax and sleep and have somewhere nice to stay, somewhere nice and warm. So the boy, relieved he has somewhere to go, takes the monk up on his offer and goes with him. And while they're having their dinner that night, the young boy tells this monk the harrowing story that had happened at his family's stable and the tragedy that fell upon his family. Now the monk knows exactly what the young boy is dealing with, and he tells the young boy, you are dealing with a kumiho, or a nine-tailed fox. And he tells the boy, you need to return immediately, and he equips the young boy with a pack of 3 bottles. There's a red bottle, a blue bottle, and a yellow bottle. And that's basically all the monk tells him. So alarmed, the boy's like, okay. And the next morning he immediately departs and goes back towards his family's stable. It takes him a couple days on horseback, and when he arrives, he notices his stable, his family's stable, is like eerily calm and quiet. So he knows something's up. He ties his horse up outside, goes inside his house, and sees that everything is basically in shambles. There's papers everywhere askew, their tables and chairs are overturned, so he knows that something bad has happened. He runs out into the yard calling for his parents, and that's where he finds his sister, who's standing in the yard, and asks him, brother, where have you gone? Where have you been this whole time? And not wanting to alert the fox that he is suspicious of who she is and her true identity, the boy goes, I, just went off for a little bit, but where are mom and dad? Like, what happened to them? And the young girl responds, oh, while you were gone, something bad happened. There was an accident, and mom and dad are dead. They're in their graves, is what she says. Of course, saddened by his parents' death, tells the girl that he's upset, but he's hungry, and would she mind making him a meal? The girl responds, okay, sure, I'll make you a meal, but so you don't run off, I'm going to tie you up. Which, I don't know, if my sister told me she was going to tie me up, I'd be like, I think I'll pass. But the boy agrees because he knows he has to stop this fox from, killing more people. So he says, okay. So she takes a thread from their mother's sewing kit, and she proceeds to tie the string around his ankle. And she goes into the kitchen and, is mixing up a little meal for her quote-unquote brother. Now, the brother realizes this is basically my last chance to break away and get free. So he notices that every once in a while she'll tug on the string to see if he's still there. He decides to tie the end of the string to a nearby chest. So when she pulls the string, it still feels like there's weight on the end of it. And he does so, runs outside, and she hears the commotion. She hears, maybe him untying his horse or the horse making noise. So she runs out and sees that her brother is galloping off on the horse that he came riding in on. Now, upon seeing this, she is pissed, and she runs after him, telling him to stop, and he's astonished by her fox-like speed. And as they're running away, or he's running away, she grabs onto the horse's tail, and he doesn't know what to do, but he does remember that the old monk had given him those 3 bottles. So he first throws the red bottle at his sister, and the red bottle breaks and bursts into flames, which she was able to nearly avoid, but she is kind of singed. Her clothes is torn a little bit, and her hair is a little burned, but she's still relentless in coming after him. So he throws the yellow bottle. Now the yellow bottle breaks, and a wall of brambles appears, and she's again able to kind of avoid the obstacle, but she gets a little scraped up and has some scratches in the process. Finally, not knowing what else to do, he throws the final bottle, which is the blue bottle, and when he throws it and it breaks on the ground, a body of water magically forms. Evidently in this story, this fox doesn't know how to swim, because the fox, or the girl, struggles, and eventually she drowns as the brother watches on. And when the body rises to the surface of the water, there's the nine-tailed fox. So he is able to vanquish the nine-tailed fox with the body of water and the magical bottles given to him by the monk. Like I mentioned about the appearance of the gumiho in this folk tale, the gumiho appeared in a very human-like form, so human-like that even her family couldn't tell that she was off or it was something different. Her parents immediately assumed that nothing was up, that it was their daughter, and it was only the brother who noticed that things were kind of weird and actually saw his sister eat the horse liver. Other than that, she was very good at concealing her identity. So, like I said, the ultimate goal of a Kumiho is actually to become a human. So their best bet in doing that is to shield their appearance or their identity from any humans that they might encounter. The ultimate objective of a Kumiho, because I know at this point you're thinking, why do Kumiho even come into contact with humans besides them wanting to eat their flesh or their liver? Because essentially Kumiho sustain themselves off of eating other creatures or organs of animals or the flesh of humans. So sometimes you'll see them kind of hanging out in cemeteries, digging up and eating corpses. But a Kumiho ultimately wants to become human. They don't want to continue living an eternity in their fox-like form. So there's actually a couple ways in folklore that it's reported a Kumiho can become human. Now you guys have probably seen there are a lot of different comic series or shows, basically a lot of cultural mentions of Kumiho and how they become human. So I've got a couple ways that I wrote down that a Kumiho can actually become a human, and like I said, it does vary from story to story or folktale to folktale, but here are some of the general ideas. If a Kumiho can marry a man and conceal her identity for 100 days without him finding out that she's a Kumiho, then she can become human. Now a lot of times you'll see in K-dramas or comic series that they'll make it to like day 99 and tell their husband, like, don't follow me into the wilderness. Now, of course, the husband, not being able to resist that temptation, decides to follow their wife, of course, on the last day, and on day 99, they realize that they've married a Kumiho. Now, another way a Kumiho can become human is if they resist the temptation to consume flesh for 1,000 days. Now, a lot of times, again, you'll see them hit like day 999, and then I guess for some reason they can't make it that last day, and then they eat some type of flesh or accidentally consume flesh. Or, on the contrary of resisting their natural urge or temptation to eat some form of flesh for 1,000 days, they can choose to eat a liver every day for 1,000 days, a human liver, and then they become human. Another way that a Kumiho can become human is if they are able to find a human who knows their identity, but that human keeps their identity a secret for 10 years. Now, in order to fulfill these objectives of ultimately becoming human, Kumiho a lot of times will be depicted in the form of like a very attractive woman or like a seductress, like I was mentioning earlier in the video. They have actually been documented as sometimes being male, but I would say like 90% of the time it's female. And the female Kumiho will use their good looks and, their slick ways into seducing men into either consuming their flesh or doing what they want. Now, there's actually a really interesting folk tale that goes into this, which involves the idea of, again, what I mentioned in the beginning of the video, which is a fox bead or a fox marble. In the story of the fox bead, there was a young boy who would walk to school every morning, and on his way to school, he always encountered this beautiful young girl who would emerge from the forest, and she would basically come up to him and say like, hey, come with me, let's go to my house in the woods. And being a charming Kumiho, he would follow. He'd be like, all right, let's go, follow her, and every time they would go to her house, she would give him a little kiss. And this is something that started happening every day on his way to school. So I'm sure this little schoolboy was like, really excited to go to school every morning, if you know what I mean. Now, as the days went by, his teacher started noticing that this young boy was like getting really tired, not really attentive in class, and just overall kind of seemed to be in a different space. So the professor asked the kid, what's going on? Like, you seem a little off, or something seems strange with you. And the young boy then divulges what he's been up to and this young girl that he's been encountering every day. Well, the professor, being wise, knows exactly what the young boy is encountering and basically tells this young boy that when the girl goes to give you a kiss, what she's been doing is she's essentially been stealing your life force with a fox bead or a fox marble. Now, this fox marble she keeps in her mouth, and as she gives him a kiss, she transfers the fox bead or the marble into his. As that absorbs his life force, she uses her tongue to essentially retrieve the marble from his mouth, and that's how she's been slowly sucking this young boy's life and energy from him, and it's basically been her sustenance to keep her going. The way to defeat her is when she does this, next time she puts the marble or bead in your mouth, swallow it. Swallow it so she can't retrieve it. And immediately look upon the sky, the land, and the people if you can. In the same fashion that she has every day, takes him back to her house in the forest and gives him a kiss. Now this time, the young boy knows what's up. So this time when she goes to give him a kiss, he proceeds to swallow the bead. Alarmed that the young boy has done this, she screams. And the girl goes, "How dare you? How could you do this to me? All I had to do was get one more soul and I would have become human. I was on 999, you were my last one." So again, you kind of see the common theme of Kumiho being this close to achieving their ultimate goal, but unfortunately unable to become human as their objective is. Excited that he has basically defeated the fox girl, who evidently just dies, he forgets to unfortunately look up to the sky. And it's actually kind of interesting because in different interpretations of the concept of looking to the sun and the sky and the people, this is the concept of knowing all the secrets to the universe, basically being enlightened. Now, the concept of enlightenment through a fox bead or marble can actually be seen as an explanation for different historical figures in ancient Korea. So one of the most famous figures surrounding the idea of a fox bead or marble is a renowned Confucian scholar named Yi Wang. Now, Yi Wang was thought to have all of these mystical or supernatural powers. He was actually said to have the power to contract physical distance, aka having the power to teleport, and it was said that he actually gained this power through swallowing a fox bead or marble. So you can kind of see the mystique and the lore behind this, basically gaining the wiseness and the supernatural powers of the nine-tailed fox through essentially swallowing their life force. Most of the time, gumiho are pictured as seductresses or women, but I was able to find a couple stories where a gumiho was pictured as a man or like a nine-tailed fox in the form of a man. Now, the one that I was able to find is actually called the Wayfarer, the Foxes, and the Tiger. So I'm gonna go ahead and go off camera really quickly and apply my false lashes, and then I'll go ahead and tell you the story of that. So the story goes that there was a wayfarer who was wandering through the woods and he got lost. Now, unable to find his way back, he finds himself in a perilous predicament. He's hungry, he's lost, but luckily as he's wandering through the woods, he stumbles upon a young lady and he tells her about his predicament, and she says, "Okay, well, I'm not really a hotel, but I can offer you a place to stay the night." They have a nice meal and he kind of settles down for the night and gets ready to go to bed. As he's laying there, he can't seem to like shake the feeling that something's off. He hears a familiar noise. He kind of sneakily goes towards where the girl is in her house and finds her sharpening a knife. Knowing this probably doesn't spell good news for him, he decides to run off, and as he's running through the woods trying to escape, he turns back and sees that this lady is essentially following him with a knife. Now, scared, he throws his pack at her, trying to stop her, and he sees lights and noise off in the distance. So he is relieved, thinking, people, here's basically where I'm going to be saved. So he runs towards the lights and yells, "Help, save me, like, this lady's chasing me with a knife." A man emerges from one of the huts and he grabs the wayfarer and says, "How dare you run away from my wife, and I'm going to throw you in jail," essentially. So he throws the wayfarer into a closed-off room, and as the man is walking away from the wayfarer, he notices that the man has a very bushy tail. Alarmed by seeing this and kind of knowing what he's up against, he thinks, "This is my chance, I've got to figure out a way to get out of here." So he requests that the man bring him a big jug of water, saying, "Before you kill me, the least you could do is bring me some water. I just don't want to die starving and super thirsty." The man chuckles and is like, "All right, I'll bring you your big jug of water." So he returns with one and tells him, "You better drink every single drop," and leaves. So the wayfarer then takes the jug of water and starts mixing it with the wall, because the wall is made of adobe. So he's able to kind of mix the wall up with the clay and eventually burrow his way out of this enclosed room. Not knowing that this hut is basically built off the side of a cliff, he gets his way out but accidentally falls off the cliff. And as he's laying there partially conscious, he is found by a tiger. The tigress grabs him by the neck, and the wayfarer, semi-unconscious, not really knowing what's going on, is dragged into her cave, where she essentially scratches him and, kind of gets him prepared for her cubs to eat. And the cubs come out, and the mom goes back out to hunt for some more. And thinking as fast as he possibly can, the Wayfarer gets up and kills all the baby cubs. Only has enough strength to climb up a tree, so he's hiding in this tree outside the cave when he sees that the woman and the man from the original beginning of the story have tracked down where he has basically escaped and fallen down the cliffside. So he watches as the Kumihos go into the cave and watches as the tigress then returns from her hunt. Now, seeing that her cubs are dead and seeing these two strangers here in her cave, the tigress and the two Gumihos get in this crazy battle. Eventually, the tigress is able to kill the two Kumihos. Having gone against two Kumihos, she finds herself mortally wounded and essentially lays down and dies. And the Wayfarer is able to run off and escape and go back to the Kumiho's village, where he finds all of these gold and riches and takes it home and becomes, like a lot of folklores and Koreans, the richest man in the village. The thing that I found most interesting, besides the introduction of like a second mythical creature in the tigress, was that the Kumiho in this story, there was both a female Kumiho and then a male Kumiho, which, like I said, you don't see that very often, but it is a thing. Alright, you guys, so I hope you enjoyed this episode of Folklore and Fairy Tale Friday, where I talked all about Kumihos. I hope you guys maybe learned something new. I actually read in the comment section of my last video, some of you guys have been using this to like fall asleep to, so I tried to make it more soothing, if you could say that. So let me know. Like I said, this is still kind of like an evolving series on my channel. I love hearing your guys' feedback. A lot of times you guys have really good ideas, and like I said, I took the idea for this week's episode from the comment section of last week's episode, so I'd be curious to know what you want next week's episode to be on, or future episodes, maybe what you like about this series. And like I said, I need the feedback because this is totally new from my channel, so it's reassuring to see that you guys are enjoying this type of content if you are, through the comments and, like I said, the like button. As always, I hope you guys are happy and healthy, and don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, share with your friends and family, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye guys!